All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for attending our Weathering the Storm workshop series number 8. Today we're going to be discussing turnaround tactics. Our webinar series objectives is to bring together community leaders and experts in their various fields and industries. Hopefully, providing a lot of practical knowledge and tools focused around what businesses are facing in today's economic times. We know we've seen lots of up and downs over the last few months. And I would also like to reach out and give and recognize a lot of our participating sponsors that have joined us during these webinar series that we've been putting on. I would like to thank SWEMA for their participation, IDAA, Idaho Technology Council, Gavent by Idaho, Department of Commerce, Meridian Chamber, Zion's Bank, and our host Profit Creek and Rectify partners. In today's webinars, we have some amazing speakers that will be speaking today to provide some key concepts and tactical frameworks around what is insolvency, what it means to your business in today's economic times. We will first hear from Jeffrey Trousdale. He's with Cohen and Kinghorn. Jeffrey graduated with high honors from the University of Northern California School of Law. Jeffrey practices law so that he can help clients resolve complicated situations when approaching a legal issue. He strives to consider the real life issues and how a specific legal action will impact his clients. Jeffrey's expertise is around business formation and planning, bankruptcy, civil litigation, and creditors' rights. Jeffrey will be discussing bankruptcy and the new laws around Subchapter V and how it may be a lifeline for a lot of small businesses to survive in these economic times. We then will be hearing from Matt McKinley, a partner with Advanced CFO. Advanced CFO offers premier outsourced fractional CFOs and accountants to help accelerate growing businesses. They offer an exceptional turnaround experts to help distressed companies navigate difficult times. Matt has over 20 years of experience working with a wide array of companies and industries. Matt graduated from Marriott School at Brigham Young University. He has an MBA in finance. He is credentialed certified turnaround accountant. And Matt is one of the only Idaho fully credentialed certified turnaround professionals. And I have had the honor to work with Matt, and I can tell you firsthand how great he is at what he does. Matt will be also discussing some insolvency, as well as provide some insight and first-hand knowledge on ways businesses can survive today. Then we'll be hearing from Victoria Cleary, from the Economic Development Administrator from the City of Meridian, as well as Sean Evans from the Meridian Chamber. They'll be discussing today the new program that they have put together called Business Revitalization Team throughout the city to help local businesses. I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping as well. So if anybody has any questions as our speakers join us today, go ahead and put them in the chat. I will be asking them questions from there. Now I'd like to turn the time over to Jeffrey.
Thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate it. One quick correction. I went to the University of North Carolina School of Law, UNC, go Heels. Just have to make that clear. And also, clearly I need to update my bio. Most of what I do is Chapter 11 debtor work, representing trustees in bankruptcy cases as well. I do some creditor work, but not a ton. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called Subchapter V of the Bankruptcy Code. It was a newly enacted law. It was signed, let's see, in August of 2019 and into 2020. And it's designed to help small business actually afford to file bankruptcy, which is something that previously was very hard to do. Recently, so because of the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Relief Act, the debt limit for a small business to qualify under what I call SABRA, the Small Business Relief Act, the debt limit is $7.5 million. So if your business, or if you as an individual who is a small business owner, if you have $7.5 million in debt or less, you qualify as a sub-V case, with a few other requirements as well. You have to have most of your debt is business debt. You have to have actually engaged in business, things like that. One quick caveat, by the way, though I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer, for those of you listening. And I have to say that, anything that I say on this webinar should not be treated as legal advice specific to your situation, but this is just kind of a general informative discussion. That just have to say that so that I protect my firm. And these are my views and only my views. So Sub-V does a few things to the bankruptcy law, and it's really cool. It's made it much, much easier for small businesses to file bankruptcy. So there are a few changes. One, you don't have what's called a committee of creditors. In various cases, in sort of a traditional Chapter 11 case, you'll have a committee of creditors that comes in, or that can come in and sort of be involved in the case. So these are all of your creditors as the business, and they can make things much more expensive. Instead, you have a Chapter 11 trustee who gets appointed, and their whole goal, or one of their stated goals, as directed by Congress, is to facilitate a consensual plan. So the goal being that when you file a Chapter 11 case, I'll sort of back up a little bit. What you're trying to do is propose a plan to repay creditors such that you can reorganize your business and move forward. So it lets you discharge your debts. It lets you pay sometimes pennies on the dollar, oftentimes pennies on the dollar of your unsecured debts. Your secured debts are still secured, but even with secured debts, you can cram those down and do some things with those. So one of the beauties of Sub-V is that it lets the debtor and the debtor alone propose a plan. So you are the person in charge of your future, basically, and you can propose a plan, and then creditors will come back and I'm sure negotiate. That's typically how it works, possibly for better treatment or just different treatment. But it's a much more friendly process for the debtor, because in other cases, there are other parties that can propose a plan. So they could say, well, we don't think this debtor has a viable business anymore. We just want it to liquidate. And this removes the ability of them to do that in most circumstances. Sub-V is also designed to be a much quicker process. So a debtor is supposed to propose a plan within 90 days of filing the case. Oftentimes in a sort of a standard Chapter 11 case, you'll see a plan not be proposed until, say, a year into the case. So it's a much faster process. There are ways that you can extend the time, but it's a pretty limited provision that allows you to extend it. So you're pretty much set to go and go fast. It lets you do something. So there's something in bankruptcy typically that's called the absolute priority rule. And what the absolute priority rule means is that if you are the owner of your business and you propose a plan in bankruptcy that pays less than 100% of the debts, then you will not be allowed to keep your equity in your business unless all the creditors agree. That's the usual case. Now with Sub-V, it flips that on its head. It lets you keep your equity in your business so long as you meet some of the other requirements. One of those requirements is that you pay creditors at least as much as they would get in a liquidation scenario. And then another requirement for Sub-V, and this is a new one, is that you pay your disposable income for a period between 3 years to 5 years. And this is a very new provision. Obviously, it was only enacted in February 2020. We don't really know yet what causes a plan to be 3 years as opposed to 5 years. Obviously, if you're approaching it from the debtor's perspective, you're going to propose a plan that says, I'll pay 3 years of my disposable income and I'm done. And then a creditor might say, well, why should I only get 3 years? I want 5 years of your disposable income because you're only going to pay me, 20% of my debt. And if I get 5 years, I'll get 40% of my debt. And cases aren't yet out there that say, well, this is what makes it a 3-year plan as opposed to a 5-year plan, as opposed to somewhere in the middle. So that's an area that's up for interpretation. I think that makes it kind of fun. You can be creative. And it also allows room for, more negotiations, which is just kind of inherent in the Chapter 11 process. If I'm a debtor's attorney, I'm probably always going to propose a 3-year plan unless I see some reason not to, or unless I've engaged in negotiations with creditors that suggest otherwise. But as a creditor's attorney, I would probably always want a 5-year plan. So that's just part of the give and take in Chapter 11. Let me think. Another thing that the sub V does, so I'll back up a second. One of the big challenges that I find when I represent companies in bankruptcy is that the owners of the company are also guarantors on almost all of the debts, or maybe a lot of the debts. And so it makes it difficult, for example, to try to tell a creditor that they're only going to get 20 cents on the dollar when they can turn around and say, well, I'm just going to sue the owner and go after her or him. One of the things that sub V does is it allows you, as the principal, you can also file for a sub V case. It allows you to strip mortgages that were, let me back up. It allows you to cram down a lien secured by your primary personal residence that was incurred for primarily business purposes and actually used for business purposes. So if you were a guarantor on a debt and that creditor wanted to put a lien on your house and you agree to that, then it allows you to essentially strip that off, again, with certain caveats and requirements being met. And that's something that is brand new as well. And that's pretty powerful because I think a lot of small business owners have run into that circumstance where they're a guarantor on debt and they have a a second or third lien on their home. And that obviously gives the creditor a lot of leverage over you, but this allows you to sort of potentially remove that lien so that your entire life isn't destroyed just because your business might be going through a reorganization. So that's really powerful. And that's a brand new tool as well. Let me think of some other things that are new with this. The costs of a sub V case are much, much less than a normal Chapter 11. In a normal sort of larger Chapter 11 case, costs can be extremely expensive, such that a lot of companies just can't afford to file bankruptcy and do it as a reorganization. With Subchapter V, they've removed a lot of requirements to get to a confirmed plan. So typically you have to file something called a disclosure statement, which is basically you laying out your plan and telling creditors why it's going to work and giving a history of your business and all sorts of additional requirements. It's expensive to create a disclosure statement. It's kind of like the types of disclosures that you see when someone's investing in a company. This removes that. So Subchapter V takes that requirement away. It makes it much cheaper, much more efficient to get to a plan and to get to confirm a plan. That helps a lot. I mentioned already, you remove the committee of creditors. That helps a lot because that can make things expensive. And then just purely by the way that it expedites the entire process, that saves as well. So that's just one of the beauties of it. It just makes it so that it's so much easier to file as a small business. And let me think. Those are some of my main punch points. I feel like I've been talking a while. Are there questions for me? And Cheryl, I don't know if you're the one who's facilitating that.
I am. Thank you, Jeffrey, for all of that great information. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and add them to the chat now. Appreciate you joining us today. We know you have to get off just here shortly in just a few minutes, but so can you kind of walk us through a typical timeline from start to finish as far as filing, what that timeline looks like to a business owner?
Sure. So you would file, let's say you file today. Ideally, absent emergency circumstances, you would have a number of your filing documents already prepared. So you have to prepare a schedule of your debts. You have to prepare a schedule of your assets. You have to prepare what's called a statement of financial affairs that sort of gives a picture into the history of your financial history of your finances. So you'd have to say, you know, I've made this many transfers to friends and family members within the last year. I've made this much money in the last 2 years, things like that. Ideally, you do all that before you file, and on the day that you file, you're also filing those documents. If you haven't done that, if there's some sort of emergency circumstance, then you have to file those documents within 14 days. In a sub V case, then there's also the Chapter 11 trustee is appointed, and then a government entity called the United States trustee does what's called an initial debtor interview. That's usually done within like 7 days of filing. And so with the initial debtor interview, I'll call it an IDI. They will meet with the debtor, whether it's an individual or whether it's the company, and they will just sort of go through some of the requirements of filing. In a sub V case, you still have to file what's called monthly operating reports. So every month you are filing your finances, basically what you did in the last month, the money you made, how it was spent, professional expenses incurred, things like that. But you'll do your initial debtor interview. That's again within like 7 days. Then you'll have what's called a meeting of creditors. That's usually within about 30 days of filing. So that is where your creditors get an opportunity to come and ask you questions. And they can ask you basically anything. It is a very open book process. That is one thing that a lot of small businesses and small business owners are maybe not quite aware of as they get into the idea of filing bankruptcy. But you are putting your finances out there for the world, and you need to be prepared for that. And you need to be aware that if you haven't run a tight ship, you might get questions on that. I'll just put it that way. And so that's just something to be aware of. So creditors will come to that meeting, they'll ask questions. The trustee will ask questions. Sometimes no one shows up. It really just depends on how interested your creditors are. And then after that, there's a status conference requirement. So the court will hold a status conference. And the point of the status conference is to say, what have you been doing to file a plan? Because you have to file a plan within 90 days. And so the court is trying to shepherd this process along to ensure that you meet the requirements of filing a plan. And then after you file the plan, you solicit votes. So you would send your plan out to all your creditors and say, vote to approve our plan or reject our plan. And then one of the things about sub V that's cool is even if every creditor rejected your plan, as long as you've met the other requirements of the bankruptcy code, your plan can still be confirmed. That's also new. In a Chapter 11 case, you have to have at least one impaired accepting class. So you have to have at least one group of creditors that accepts your plan. But in a sub V case, you do not. Again, as long as you meet a lot of the other requirements. And so, ideally in a sub V case, so I have one that I filed recently. I'm hoping that we are going to be done with that case. We filed at the beginning of June. We have a hearing today, in fact, to seek approval of the solicitation of the plan. So we'll mail it out for votes probably today or within this week. And then we'll have a hearing probably in September, and then hopefully we're done. Assuming again that we've met all the requirements and of the bankruptcy code and creditors agree and both agrees. So, ideally you can get it done fast. Now, that case that I filed, that's a fast case. I mean, I filed my plan within like 3 days of filing the petition, and I had prepared all these documents before we filed because there wasn't really an emergency circumstance. There wasn't someone trying to foreclose on a house or something like that. So that's not necessarily what you would expect, but the code anticipates and expects that you would file your plan within 90 days, and then you would go through the process of getting that confirmed. So, you know, I would imagine most sub-V cases should be done within 6 months. As far as the actual bankruptcy plan confirmation process, then you have another 3 to 5 years where you're paying your disposable income to your creditors, and obviously that's all on you. At that point, I'm probably out of the picture, and it's really just a matter of you making your payments.
Perfect, thank you. One more question I have for you is there anything that's excluded that's not allowed? Maybe, for instance, you know, payroll taxes or something like that, or is there no exclusions?
I'm not sure I understand the question. When you say excluded, what do you mean?
Is there anything that's not allowed under the subchapter V to put into your plan as far as making payments towards that debt?
No, your plan, you would try to anticipate and put in every debt that you have. So yeah, payroll and taxes and things like that are usually what are called priority debts. So those get paid first under the bankruptcy code. And so your plan would propose to pay those things first. So, you know, and as well, because lawyers are lawyers, we get paid first too. Don't hate. And so anyway, yeah, those debts would all be included. Actually, a really nice thing about sub V is admin fees. So the fees of me representing you, the fees of someone like Cheryl or Matt coming in as a financial advisor and representing you, those can be paid through the plan out of the disposable income. And that is also new. And that, in my view, has the potential to make it much less expensive as well. Creditors don't like that, because if you're an unsecured creditor and that person and the debtor is paying me first, obviously that's coming out of that unsecured creditor's pocket, because it's just a limited pool. I mean, your disposable income for 3 to 5 years is your disposable income for 3 to 5 years. There's no real way to change that, right? And you're making your best projection, and that's where creditors are going to push back, and they'll say, you know, maybe these expenses are unreasonable. You shouldn't have these expenses, or we think you're going to make more money than you're projecting, and so you should have a higher, you know, payment. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. You're making your best projection, and you're kind of setting that at the beginning of the case over for the 3 to 5 year period. And so anyway, I'm kind of going off on a rabbit trail, but yes, you would include your taxes, you'd include all of your debts, you would include secured debts. Those would be in different classes of claims in the plan. And you'd provide for their payment under the plan. Those would have to be paid though. Like priority debts tend to have to be paid in full. So
there's no discount, no type of negotiated or discounts allowed for those priority debts.
You could negotiate. I mean, if you have debts with, say, the state taxing authority, and the reality is you're just not going to be able to pay those, you can certainly negotiate. Chapter 11 is a negotiation process, but they can also come back and say, well, no. We want to be paid in full. And there are only certain debts that can be paid through the plan. Other priority debts have to be paid in full on what's called the effective date of the plan, kind of like day one. And so, you know, that's something that I'd have to get in the weeds on each individual case. So I don't want to misstate anything there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and providing great insight and information, and we appreciate. Jeffrey's information will be in the ebook. So if anybody would like to contact him or have additional questions, his information will be provided in that. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I have to jump off for a hearing, but I appreciate your time, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll now turn the time over to Matt McKinley.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl. Hey, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you. Thanks much for the invitation to join you. And I appreciate very much Jeff's insight and expertise. He's blazing the trail with the subchapter 5s. This is brand new legislation. He's filed a couple cases on it, and I know a lot of attorneys in the Valley are keeping their eyes on the cases he's filing because he's really setting a precedent for what's coming. Great attorney and great advice. Cheryl, are you in a spot? Can you broadcast my slides?
I can. Here we go.
Fantastic. Okay, let's, a little bit about me. As Cheryl indicated, I'm a certified turnaround professional. I think there are 2 or 3 of us in Idaho, and nearly 100% of my work is helping companies that are in some state of decline or distress weather the storm. And certainly with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing a little bit of a wave of activity. There are some things the government are doing to defer that activity or to help small businesses, but it certainly is an interesting time. If you can advance the slide, let's go 2 forward to the next one. So I want to really address 3 questions today. One, for business owners, how do I know if my business is insolvent? And there's a real distinction between illiquid and insolvent, and we'll talk about those distinctions. Second, there's a unique dynamic that happens when lenders, where companies that have borrowed money get transferred to a group in the bank called special assets. We'll talk about what that means. It's a very strong signal that lenders don't always tell borrowers what that means. We'll talk about that. And then third, we'll get a little bit more tactical and practical and talk about what are some tactical things that we can do to save the business before we have to file a Chapter 11, Subchapter 5, for example. So those are the 3 items that I intend to address here on the call. First, how do I know if my business is insolvent? Let's advance the slide. Well, you know you're insolvent when you're using the company's first dollar, right? So if we advance, that's the cartoon definition, but there is actually a legal definition. And there are a couple animations here, Cheryl. I'll just go ahead and advance those forward. Yeah, that's great. So from a legal definition, the law defines insolvency in 2 ways. There's a cash flow insolvency, which is a company that has or is unable to pay debts as they become due. And then there's a legal term, a balance sheet insolvent company. This is a company with a negative net worth, a company which has assets that exceed, that have liabilities that exceed the value of the assets. Some of the signs of a cash flow insolvent company, these are companies that have no cash in a bank account. If they have lines of credit, those lines are tapped out. These are companies that are stretching payables, and their payable balances are accumulating over time. These are companies that generally have production lags in their production or out of stocks in their inventory. And one of the signs that I see most frequently for companies that are experiencing cash flow insolvency is they stop communicating with their creditors, which is a poor decision. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The signs of cash flow insolvency are usually fairly prevalent to the creditors. Creditors know, hey, I used to be paid in 20 days, now it's 40 or 60 or 90. And those, usually the writing's on the wall with creditors when a company approaches cash flow insolvency. When I'm engaged with a client, one of the first questions I ask that helps me understand if the company is in an illiquid situation is, are you current in your obligations with your payroll taxes? And if the answer to that is no, that's usually the first thing that slips, because it takes the federal government, or the state government in that case, 90 days before they really started getting aggressive. And so that's usually a telltale sign. Balance sheet insolvency is much less visible. For companies that report to a bank on a borrowing base, usually the borrowing base is out of covenant, or if the borrowing base allows them to borrow 80% of their collateral, usually, balance sheet insolvent situation are above that 80% mark or so. And really without appraisals or collateral inspections, evaluations on the assets, it's really hard to know whether a company is balance sheet insolvent. But suffice it to say, a company that is cash flow insolvent or illiquid for an extended period of time very soon becomes balance sheet insolvent. I see that time and time again. Usually companies, the chain of events is a company becomes illiquid, meaning they've got a working capital problem, which turns into cash flow insolvency, meaning the only way they can satisfy debts is by borrowing more, which is a dangerous situation. And then they become balance sheet insolvent. By the time the company gets to that point, the options are much, much more limited in how to recover. Now, the good news is the United States has, through the coronavirus pandemic, they've helped provide relief for insolvent companies or companies that are approaching insolvency, and in a few different ways. They have injected capital into the economy. Many of us received stimulus checks. Many businesses received these payroll protection program loans or EIDL loans. They're trying to help companies pay obligations as they become due. And then the second thing they've done is the federal government or the state government in many cases has imposed moratoriums on foreclosures, which prevents lenders from getting aggressive and foreclosing for a period of time. Now, these are temporary, and a lot of experts are saying, come the fall, when the stimulus funds dry up and when the moratoriums expire, we've got a big problem in our hands because companies won't have the liquidity and perhaps the sales won't have returned as robustly as we need to thrive and survive. But we have seen some relief in the short term. We'll see if the government continues to extend that relief. One of the things that I've experienced as a turnaround professional is a business owner very rarely admits that his or her business is insolvent. I've been a turnaround professional for 12 years, and never once has a business owner told me, yeah, I admit I'm insolvent. I had a client that was doing 10 million in sales, had $6 million of negative equity on its balance sheet, and this business owner insisted that he was just in an illiquid situation. And so when we think about turning around our business or helping affect operational improvements to turn around our business, one of the first things we can do, one of the best things we can do is recognize the signs of insolvency, admit those signs, kind of like an AA meeting. I admit I'm insolvent, and the sooner you can admit that, get a message in front of your creditors that allows you to negotiate how you're going to dig out of that hole, the more effective and more options are available. I'm familiar with a retailer who, in the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic, this was early March before the economy shut down. He saw the newspaper articles and said, "Hey, if this coronavirus makes it to my location, or my locations, it's a 3-store facility, I've got a problem. I won't be able to pay rent." And so he called his landlords before the stay-at-home orders were issued and just said, "Hey, you just need to know that if this coronavirus goes anywhere, I may have a problem." Well, you can imagine 30 days later, when it did go somewhere, he had a much more productive call with his landlord because he had already socialized or anticipated that event. Let's go to the next slide. We'll talk for a minute about special assets, and then I want to come back to options available to insolvent companies. While a borrower might hide from insolvency, rest assured that a lender, typically a secured lender, knows very well the signs of insolvency. And when a lender sees those signs of insolvency, a very interesting dynamic happens within the bank. Think of a bank for a moment as operating in two silos. In one silo, you've got the relationship side of the bank, where borrowers are working with people at the bank that really, really value the relationship. They want to sell new products. They want to help the business grow and expand. That relationship manager is probably fairly often in contact with the borrower, trying to figure out how can we better help you and serve your needs. The borrower is probably also getting courted by other banks who want their business, seen it as a healthy loan or a healthy credit. Well, when a company approaches insolvency and starts tripping warning signals at the bank, that loan gets transferred from the relationship side of the bank to a part of the bank called special assets, or special situations, or credit resolution. And when that change happens, the relationship with the bank changes in a dramatic way. Where the relationship formerly was very much, we love you, now the relationship in special assets is, how quickly can we get your loan off our books? It becomes almost a liability to the bank to have your loan on its balance sheet. There is no can't we just be friends scenario here. And so because of that dynamic, if any of those business owners on the call today get a call from their banker that says, hey, your loan has been assigned to our special assets group, I think it's important that you understand that means the way your bank perceives your loan is now very, very different. And you should be visiting this as how can I, the bank is looking at this as, how do I best recover my credit? How do I get out of this loan the soonest? Now, very often I'll go into a client and I'll say, hey, we've got a problem here. The bank has asked me to help you recover. And the client will say, listen, I've got many, many bankers that are courting me that want my business. This is going to be your quickest engagement ever. But what they don't realize is that what one bank sees in special assets is a signal to many other lenders. Other lenders, when they understand that your loan is in special assets, it really dries up options for other lenders for refinance as well. And so as you start tripping some of those covenants and approaching a loan towards special assets, it's important to take swift action while you still have the most options available to you. Let's go to the next slide. I call this kind of the funnel of options here. The earlier, and let's go ahead and advance the animations to get all of the options up on the screen. I think there are 6 or 7. I call this the cost of delay. When a business owner identifies it's insolvent or approaching insolvency, the earlier it can make that identification, the more options are available to it. For example, if a business owner anticipates it, as did that retail store who called his landlord before the coronavirus pandemic hit, it had all sorts of options. It negotiated replacement terms with the landlord. It was able to make adjustments to its expense structure to save cost. It made some operational improvements. It changed its marketing budget. It just had a lot of flexibility. The longer a borrower delays, the fewer or narrower those options become. And kind of the worst case scenario is a Chapter 7 filing, which essentially is where you throw the keys of the business to a trustee to liquidate. And that really is worst case scenario, but occurs because business owners delay or defer or don't take the action necessary. We won't go through all of these options. Each of these 6 options on the screen has a time and place, but suffice it to say that the longer a business owner waits to take action, the narrower those options become. So the next slide, another cartoon. Unfortunately, in too many cases, owners tend to take action too late, and they lower themselves on that in the zone of insolvency, narrowing the options available to them. Okay, let's go forward again. So let's get a little bit more tactical now. How to work with creditors out of court. Let's see, and one more. So the first, like I said, is admit the problem. Let's be sure that we see signs of insolvency, distinguish between illiquidity, which turns into insolvency. I think it's important that as soon as we see it, we compile a short-term plan. And this is a 90-day plan. I think of it as a short-term cash forecast, 90 days. We're going to forecast all the cash receipts and disbursements of the business and just show a path that for the next 3 months, we can pay our creditors or we can stay current with obligations. And if the answer to that is no, then we can start making the pay or do not pay decisions. Once we have that 90-day plan together, we can meet with the creditors, have phone calls with them or face-to-face meetings with masks and say, hey, here's the situation. We're going to show them our cash flow forecast. We're in a liquidity event here. We need a little bit of relief. Can you help us out? Once we've got the buy-in from our creditors, but we're in a cash crunch, then we go to work preparing a long-term plan. And in fact, in those initial meetings with creditors, as we're showing them the short-term plan, we say, we're going to come back to you in a month, in 30 days, and we're going to show you what our 18-month business plan looks like. And so number 4, prepare a long-term plan. That's going to be our view for the next 18 months that shows either we have a shot to turn this operation around, this business around operationally, or perhaps we need to explore other options, but we bought ourselves time to sell those options to our creditor pool. My style is to be as transparent with my communication as we can with our creditors. They've advanced money and assets and resources to the company. We're going to be a good steward of those and be transparent and frequent in our communication. If we determine, or when we determine that there is a long-term plan that's viable, we're going to make sure that we've got the right team assembled to accomplish that plan. Just a couple key points that I'll make here. One, the odds of saving a business out of court are much better with fewer creditors of a like mind. I tend to think that once you get 5 or 6 creditors that are secured or that may have competing interests, the chance of affecting a plan out of court become harder. And so sometimes what I'll advise a business owner to do is if we can consolidate some debts, or maybe there's some convenience payments we can make to creditors to just kind of clean up our list of creditors, it makes negotiating with fewer creditors much more effective. Another key point or tip that I'll offer, sometimes when banks see a company that is approaching insolvency or illiquidity, the bank will ask the borrower to hire a professional to help them. And I'm very often approached by banks who will say, McKinley, will you please, this company just needs your help. Will you go spend a couple months and help them? I think that the more effective solution is for the business owner to take a proactive approach. And if they're approaching uncharted territory, to get the help before the bank asks them to. And there's a couple reasons. One is you want a professional that's there that you know is representing your interests, and that you've got the loyalty of the consultant there. And 2, again, the earlier you get in, just the more options are available. And usually lenders are a little slow to force somebody on the borrower. I skipped over point 3, never ask for more time, more money, or ask the lender to accept new risk. Those are just cardinal rules. Lenders look for warning signs if the borrowers really get it, if they understand how dire the situation is. And one of the signs of that is if your borrower ever asks for more time, more money, or more risk, They better be willing to give something up in exchange for those asks, usually in the form of extra collateral or guarantees. So just be forewarned that if you're putting a plan together and you're asking for more time or more money or more risk, be willing to give something in exchange for that ask. Okay, the next slide. We won't go through these in great detail. When I approach an engagement, there are 12 things that I do or I look at to help the business recover operationally. We talked about that short-term plan. We're going to forecast cash for 90 days. Included with that is we're really going to apply a tourniquet to cash. We're going to limit the number of ways that cash leaves the business. That means if there's a slew of corporate credit cards out among the employee base, we're going to probably shut many of those off. We're going to limit the number of people that can actually sign checks. We're going to really take control of cash and apply a tourniquet in the business. If you can limit those ways and make it hard to spend cash, we can do a better job preserving cash. We're also going to identify hidden cash. We're going to turn the couch cushions over in the business and look for coins. You'd be amazed at the number of legal retainers that have been sitting on the books for 2 or 3 years that are $25,000. In one project I worked on, they had a $10,000 utility deposit with their power company that we fought to have refunded back to us. Every business has change under the couch cushions, and we're gonna explore and monetize that change. We look for expense savings. We find that business owners are very swift to increase their expense structure while they're growing, but not so swift to pare back that expense structure when times are hard. One of my roles oftentimes in going into a business is helping companies identify expense savings and making those hard decisions. While it's hard to lay people off, it's a better alternative than losing the business and closing the doors. Number 4, restructure trade payables. We talked a little bit about that and the actions that can be taken. This will be sitting down with creditors, identifying, hey, we're out of terms. We recognize the obligation to stay current, to bring you whole, but we're in a cash crunch, folks. We need some help now. Sometimes creditors, there are many different ways to restructure trade payables, and no two situations are ever exactly the same. But generally, if we're communicating with trade creditors, we can buy some patience and time and cooperation. Number 5, rid the company of deadwood. Every time I go into a situation where the company is in a state of decline, you've got naysayers inside the ranks that are pulling the business down. Whenever a company is affecting an operational turnaround, you want cheerleaders on your team. And if there are people that aren't on board, we'd rather have them out of the company. We'd rather have them off the bus if they're not going to help us advance our purpose. And so we're going to just in a tactful way identify who in the company isn't helping advance our purpose. We want everybody rowing in the same direction. Number 6, we're going to get really aggressive collecting cash from customers. Our philosophy is that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we're going to be that squeaky wheel with the customers. If you've got accounts receivables, we'll collect as quickly as we can. There are some ways to monetize certain assets of the business. Factor receivables, it can be a source of really quick cash. It's expensive money, but if it's a matter of paying payroll, that's an option we can look at. I'm also amazed at obsolete inventory that companies sometimes have on their books, or obsolete or non-productive equipment. We're going to take a look at what's on the balance sheet that we can quickly monetize in the cash in the form of inventory and assets. The next 3, there might be some opportunity to restructure long-term agreements or bank debt or lease agreements. You may consider sale leasebacks if you own real property. But those are ways to help bring cash into the business as well. You'll notice most of these are financial restructuring. What isn't addressed here are the operational marketing, kind of the lifting sales efforts. And so all the while as well, we're going to be looking at helping the business lift sales, penetrate their markets in more efficient and effective ways, improve pricing, margins, those types of things as well. And in some cases, of course, the right professionals can help. If the situation's dire, you'll want to retain a good attorney that can help you preserve your rights. Okay, well, that's a lot of talking. One last little cartoon here, just to lighten the mood. And I think that's about all I got. Cheryl, why don't we open it up for any comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you, Matt, so much for your great presentation and all your knowledge that you've provided. If anybody has any questions they would like to ask, go ahead and put it in the chat. So Matt, you talked a little bit about how important communication is. When do you think it's a good time for business owners to start that communication, and what should that communication from the beginning kind of look like?
Sooner is always better. If a trade vendor is offered 30-day terms and it's going to take you 45 days to pay, I'd make a phone call, right? And it's just a general business practice. I think communication is effective. One other just comment that I'll make, typically for companies that have accounting departments, it's one thing for an accounts payable person to talk with an accounts receivable person. It's another thing for a CEO to talk with the CEO, right? I think, when a company is in a deteriorating position, and you can see that it's going to be 60 to 90 days before you can cure an obligation, for the CEO or the CFO or somebody with a senior position that is in a position to make decisions, makes that phone call to another leader of the creditors organization, it really buys a lot of goodwill. It shows, hey, we recognize the obligation. We're going to do what we can to cure it. We're just in a tough spot right now and appreciate you working with us. That goes a lot further. So long answer, the short answer would be, communicate at any time you see that you're going to miss a payment. Probably the more dramatic that miss is going to be, the more senior those calls should come from.
Perfect, thank you. And then when it comes to kind of negotiations, right? You have a debt, and having that, opening up that conversation to the creditor on, kind of negotiation. How would you recommend opening that up, and what are some of the negotiation tools you've used to make the negotiations successful?
Yeah, I think it's understanding what both parties want, right, or what's going to work for them. In some cases, I've had clients that have been willing to give up equity in their business in exchange for trade debt. In other cases, there's no way that business owner is going to give up equity, and so just kind of understanding what they're willing to put on the table and the start. And then on the other end, your creditor might be having liquidity issues itself, and so knowing what they want, and I think if you've got an early and open dialogue from the start, you'll have a pretty good read on what the terms of satisfying that debt might look like. I think it's just transparency from both sides.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate you joining us today and all your insight. We'll open it up just for another brief question and answer session towards the end. So if anybody has any additional questions they would like to ask, go ahead and feel free to put it in the chat. Now I'd like to turn it over to Sean Evans from Meridian Chamber to discuss a little bit about what the City of Meridian is doing to help with their new program on the revitalization team.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for having me join today. Victoria Cleary with the City Economic Development Office couldn't be here. She's on another meeting online right now, so I'm happy to share with the people on the call the partnership that we have going with the city on this program. Early in April and May, the Meridian Chamber and various partners were really helping businesses understand the closure directives and the reopening guidelines that they were facing as they were coming, as we were coming out of the business closures that were going on. Our Keep Meridian Healthy campaign that we launched at that time was focused on the relationship businesses have with their customers and how they could communicate the safe and healthy way that they were reopening. One of the things that we identified and what we were trying to do is moving into stage 2 of our Keep Meridian Healthy campaign was that now we needed to really work on the elements of the program designed to help with the overall health of the business. So what we've done is we put together business revitalization teams that are made up of volunteers, of chamber members that are willing to go out and work alongside the business with the owners and managers and helping bring expertise and fresh perspective. Cheryl, do you have the slides Tori sent, or if you share your screen, I can, let me share my screen, I can definitely put those up. Thank you. So the whole purpose of this is the chamber and the city are not the experts, but we do have a lot of professionals that we work with that are chamber members or that have offered their volunteer services. Now, these are not people that are going to give you long-term legal advice or things like that, but they are people that we can help convene and offer mentorship for small businesses as they try to navigate the road to recovery. This is basically just some peer-to-peer consulting that we're offering. Sometimes you just need a fresh perspective from someone on the outside to be able to look at what you're facing. If you'll scroll down to the next slide. The city was also looking at ways that it can help provide relief for businesses immediately to some of the things that were being suggested as far as how they were going to be changing their business models, how they were going to try and expand their space to be able to utilize the outdoor space for social distancing rules and things like that. So the city approved fee waivers for 3 business-related permits throughout the rest of 2020. And that's fee waivers on special signage, utilizing adjacent outdoor space for promotional sales, and for restaurants looking to expand their outdoor dining space. There still is a request process that you have to submit with the city for these approvals, but all of the fees have been waived for these. This is just a way that the city is looking to try and help the Meridian businesses be able to eliminate some of those costs associated with their needing to change their business plan. If you would switch over to the next slide, I think it's on a different deck. Yeah, all right, excellent. So the business revitalization teams are made up of volunteer professionals, as I mentioned, chamber members. These include some CPAs, commercial real estate professionals, financial planners, marketing professionals, business strategists, and HR professionals that are there to help you kind of talk through some of the things before you actually have to reach out and find those partners or professionals that you're going to have to pay to take those next steps. Some of the things that the business revitalization teams can definitely help you talk through before you reach that stage is restructuring your debt, evaluate new markets, future markets for your products. How can you change a market demographic that you're going after? Establishing short-term and long-term strategies, helping renegotiate your lease. Some of the best things that commercial real estate professionals can do is really help you understand what is available out there and how to enter those conversations. And then also just developing communication plans, new marketing strategies for your products. These are volunteers that are helping you with this. They're going to stop short of offering you any, legal advice that you can act on, or steps that you can maybe take active actions with them. But they also may be able to offer their services beyond the volunteer efforts that they're doing. For more information, you can email us at the Meridian Chamber at info@meridianchamber.org, or just call us, and we can help connect you with some of the people that volunteered to be a part of these business revitalization teams. With that, Cheryl, I'm happy to try and answer any questions. I know Tori wished she could be here today, but was unable.
Right. Thank you. So thank you, Sean. I appreciate you stepping on today and giving some information on what this plan looks like. Can you tell me, so do the businesses have to be in Meridian, or can they just be in the Treasure Valley?
We are looking for businesses in Meridian specifically. With this being a city program and a Meridian Chamber program, we are looking for small businesses in Meridian, but they do not have to be a Meridian Chamber member. So we're just trying to focus our efforts, our volunteers' time and things like that to the Meridian market.
Perfect. And so can you kind of tell us a little bit about what the team would do, as far as, kind of timeline and scope of what that would look like to a business if they chose to go ahead and bring the team into their business?
Yeah, not every business is going to be the same. So, we would consult with the business, find out what it is that they're looking for, whether they're looking for some guidance on their marketing side, if they're looking for someone to help them with their commercial real estate challenges, or if they're looking for somebody to help with their financial review. Then we will pair them up with volunteers that have already given us their names and volunteered to help with these businesses. These volunteers will then work with them for a limited number of hours, kind of give them a little bit of mentorship and guidance of what they're looking for. In many cases, they may be saying, yes, you need to contract with a firm that's going to help you develop a much deeper cash flow financial plan. Or if it's a commercial real estate professional, it may not be your commercial real estate professional, but they're going to give you some advice of how to approach your property owner lease negotiations and things like that. So they may not be the ones that you actually will be working with, but it's mentorship. It's volunteers offering you some advice. And as I said, fresh perspective. Many times when you're involved in your own business, you have blinders on and you're not maybe seeing the opportunities that are available to your business.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. I'll open it up to any of the attendees. If you'd like to ask any additional questions, you can raise your hand or go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll give a few more minutes to do that. While people are posting their questions, if they have any, I'd like to thank our speakers today. We appreciate you getting on and giving some valuable information to what's going on and help what's going on with the economy today and a lot of the businesses. And, like Matt had said, there's, a lot of people were able to get some of the stimulus and the PPP and some of the other SBA opportunities to be able to get their businesses through. So, as those funds start to be used up and consumed, there's a lot of opportunity for businesses out there and a lot of people willing, Advanced CFO and the Chamber and the city, and there's a lot of resources out there for small businesses, because I know everybody in the community is kind of pulling together to make sure that our community stays strong and that we continue to work together, businesses to business, helping one another get through some of these trying times. And hopefully, we'll be able to get through these trying times faster than what they're saying. But, being able to be we're lucky to be able to have in a strong community and a strong city that we live in, the Treasure Valley, with amazing companies and amazing people out there willing to help out these small businesses. So Looks like there isn't any additional questions. So again, I want to thank our speakers today and everybody for attending. Our next session will be in 2 weeks. And I also want to encourage those. Zions Bank is holding a webinar series that tomorrow. So go on to their website and register for that as well. So thanks everybody for attending today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.